collapsed. Yo, 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 can y'all hear me on this channel? Right now we covering Dallas apparently.
Hi, I'm Eric, and would you sit through a 60-minute
until Jonathan is here. What's up, Tom?
my views, go ahead, like and subscribe. Hit that like button. Smash that notification bell. So right now, this is downtown Dallas. Look like things starting to pick up a little bit. This is Baltimore right here. Pardon the audio. These people ain't got no sound on their shit in the helicopters and shit. So, alright, so Baltimore picking up. Let's see what's going on in Atlanta. So it look like the most actions in Dallas. Um, if y'all got more links with some live stream shit y'all want to watch, just drop it in the comments. Mm, mm. Look kind of light though. Okay, we back here in Atlanta now. Like, subscribe, and shit. Like,
charge your batteries at your car?
Yeah, but that takes time. I just want. I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, okay. Do you want to put the camera down and go down?
This is so fluid when this is
Courtney, well, they were cut off at Wilshire to go back eastbound, so I think they're going to try to go southbound on the south side of Rodeo Drive. That's that little street that goes between the buildings there, going along that Beverly Wilshire Hotel. They're actually right there, kind of congregating at the corner. I think they're a little confused about what they're doing too and which way to go, but you can see that group kind of still going southbound. We're going to try to swing Sky 5 around and get a better shot of that. But like you were saying, this group has been different than those others we saw in the Fairfax district. For the most part, peaceful. We haven't seen any vandalism really. They did take their time to kind of stand up against that skirmish line that Beverly Hills Police Department has put out, but has now made their way southbound. It looks for like a majority of them are stopping. I'm not sure if that's because there's another blockade, but we're going to try to swing around and try to get a glimpse between those buildings and trees. But down here, that's a little tough. They have some beautiful trees and beautiful buildings that do kind of block us from the sky. But let's take a look as we continue to go around the building. But as we do, I'm just going to kind of go over to the other side of Wilshire, where we'll just point out that even Tiffany Co. is boarded up, so they were prepping for this being a possibility to this weekend. Or we don't know when that happened, but they did make that adjustment so that their company was protected. But we're going to continue here. You can see the Wilshire, Beverly Wilshire there, and it looks like the protesters are just making their way slowly southbound on South Rodeo Drive. It looks like some might be maybe defacing some property there behind that tree. They're all kind of huddled up against that window. It's really hard to say. But for the majority of these people out here, like you guys were saying, they're doing it right. They're making their voice heard. They're protesting as they should. And unfortunately, every once in a while, we just have a few people that have some other ideas. It looks like they've found a way into the building. Wow. Okay, so they're making their way into the hotel proper here at Beverly and Wilshire, and back out. So maybe they didn't find a way through, or security was on the other side. Who knows? But that has been stopped, and those protesters are now back out of that building and continuing their way southbound on South Rodeo. And just like we were talking about, majority of them just walking through the streets.
Escalate the situation. They're trying to get them to disperse, but
Okay, thank you. Simon to Sky 5, can we go get fuel? Let's go get fuel. Booth, we're going to get fuel. Talk to you soon.
having to do so, they are throwing some of those flashbang grenades. We saw that here from News Chopper 4 Alpha, and we also saw tear gas being deployed, and it did disperse the crowd. They did move in a little easterly direction. They've kind of backed up, but you can see now they're kind of staging here just east of those line of LA County Sheriff officers. There's three main areas. Right here we are on Beverly Boulevard. To the south of us, that's where 3rd Street is, and we have two large groups, one right there near Fairfax and 3rd, what Gil Levis was showing earlier. So we have three large groups in the same proximity. LA County Sheriffs, LAPD, they definitely have their hands full right now.
You know, Megan, as we're looking at your shot and looking at the shots before, we want to remind our viewers this started off as a Black Lives Matter protest around noon today at Pan Pacific there in the Fairfax district. It was a peaceful protest that eventually turned violent a few hours later. There were skirmishes between police and protesters. We have seen several vehicles lit on fire, and now we have seen crowds really disperse in that area, Megan, and then just really a handful of people who are actively engaging with those officers.
Yeah, there are definitely instigators right here. We're seeing a couple of people here. This gentleman right up there in the white T-shirt. Earlier I saw a description moments ago throwing objects at law enforcement. And in fact, when they deployed some of those tear gas canisters, we saw them throw them back toward law enforcement officials. I kind of want to give you a perspective here. So let me just clear this shot up here. Let me show you. This is Beverly Boulevard right here. This is where we have this large group here. A lot of folks being rowdy. Now I'm going to show you two other large groups here. See if I can find them in the camera right over here. This is where Gil Levis was earlier. You can see this large group of individuals. This is Fairfax and 3rd. Now that's quite a different story. Everybody's just standing there and peacefully protesting. LAPD is in full force over there. But you can see this crowd is orderly, and we're not seeing the chaos that we are seeing with this crowd here along Beverly Boulevard. So as I focus back onto the crowd here, I think that's Pan Pacific Park, if I'm not mistaken, but you can see folks right there down below, and as they scatter more, they start running and scattering as law enforcement escalates the situation. They want them to be able to protest peacefully, but at times these individuals are starting to throw objects at law enforcement, and when they do that, they are deploying those flashbang grenades and the tear gas canisters in order to disperse these individuals here down below.
Yeah, and if that's the LA County Sheriff's Department, would it be the Special Enforcement Bureau there?
Want to?
Temperature here, and it gets a little hot.
I was with Steve.
We got a natural cause.
We were done for
What
it.
is
I was
natural
fine.
cause?
He kept talking. I was like, y'all gotta get off. Thank you.
You guys are. I was looking back and forth going. I was with my president, so I had a long experience.
Yeah.
So I was like happy not to be there, but I was also there.
I believe those are tear gas, so they're throwing tear gas at the protesters. And when they do that, sometimes I've been seeing protesters pick up the canister and throw it back toward law enforcement officers. There's somebody right here. We'll see if they're going to do that. And, you know, they're attempting to do that. But, you know, they're not going to let them use objects as weapons. As, for example, they are taking these trash bins. They are trying to use that as cover. You can see it's just a few people. That's the problem. It's just a few people who are creating all this chaos. They're putting cones over the tear gas canisters right now. These people are coming prepared, knowing that they're going to engage with law enforcement officials. So they do have a mask, which protects them from that tear gas, but a majority of these people don't. You see them, they disperse, they start running away. They run about a block or two. They let things settle down, and then they start testing the waters, start pushing their way back towards officers, and it's just kind of a cat and mouse game. We go back and forth, back and forth. We're not seeing any vandalism right now. So far, they're just going back and forth with police officers right now, but fortunately, we're not seeing any destruction of any private property or any just running around here, creating some problems for officials.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We see people moving out of that area now after that, which I guess was probably tear gas that was deployed right there, because they are moving quickly out of the area. We see them holding back now a lot more.
Right, and look at all these cars here. I mean, these people were just probably traveling along the streets here. We got a big rig here from the United States Postal Service. So they are stuck in their vehicles, just hoping that they'll be able to safely get out. Fortunately, we're not seeing any vandalism or any violent acts to any of these people. Here's this red vehicle trying to get through the intersection. Sometimes the crowd gets all wild up right now, but so far this person is slowly trying to make their way through this intersection. And what a difference. I mean, again, I showed you, I'm going to show you again the different crowds. That's the crowd there over on Beverly Boulevard. You take a different scene over here. This is Fairfax and 3rd. You can see the large group of people, but they're all standing close together in an orderly fashion. So they are protesting. They do have law enforcement officials out there, but you can see the difference. You can see how these people are peacefully protesting. We don't have any disruption. We don't see them using any weapons or any the trash bins as a barrier or any way to instigate the officers. A lot of them are putting their hands up right now. No doubt they are chanting a lot of different things, but you can see the difference with those protests. LAPD, LA County Sheriffs, they want you to protest like this. You have the right. Get out there and do that. What the behavior they're discouraging is the behavior that we're seeing here along Beverly Boulevard. These individuals, these are the few that are making this thing just out of control.
Yeah, Megan, you know, the mayor saying today the protests that you just showed us, the peaceful protests against that police line, is the kind of protest they are willing and more than willing to protect. It's that these skirmishes, these people who are trying to instigate with the officers and these deputies is what is going to cause them maybe to lose their restraint. They can only have so much restraint in these situations. We want to bring in I-Team investigator Eric Leonard. I believe he's with us as well. And Eric, you mentioned that 2 officers, at least 2, were injured today here in the Fairfax district. One of them seriously. What updates do you have for us right now, Eric?
Hey, Jonathan, we'd heard, this is now more than an hour ago, that 2 LAPD officers had been injured in some of the initial confrontations between this crowd. That's back at the time when those patrol cars were first set on fire. But it's not clear how serious their injuries were. We heard one was more serious than the other, but no specifics at this point. As you can imagine, there is an enormous amount of chaos in trying to manage this situation. And in fact, you can see in the aerial pictures we've been showing, the crowds of protesters have split off in several different directions, and you've got groups of police officers at some intersections, no officers at other. You have sheriff's deputies that have come in to assist in one area, and then LAPD officers forming the core of the crowd control effort in a different part of this. So because there's been so much to manage, it's been difficult to get specific information out of the command post right now. As you can imagine, the people doing this have their hands full. And as far as who's managing this, well, it's LAPD Chief Michael Moore himself. He rolled up to the scene a couple of hours ago, took over for one of the deputy chiefs that had been in charge of the early crowd control efforts. That's when the protesters that had been
Lawrence, we're looking at video right now. You can see people gathering in Minneapolis. But as Steve Harrigan said, that these were mainly, as you were saying, these are people being really peaceful and trying to get their voices heard. In the last few seconds that I have with you, you know, if you had a chance to talk one-on-one with some of these folks, if they were listening to you, what would you want to tell them about how better to seek justice than the rioting tonight?
I would tell them I understand their pain. I understand it. I'm a young black male. I've experienced some of the same encounters that they've experienced, but I
LAPD officers were brought in anticipation of a big protest tonight, whether that was in downtown or this one in Fairfax or any other part of the city. Hundreds of LAPD detectives who would typically be working investigating murders or robberies or human trafficking cases told to put on their uniforms and report in at 4 p.m. today. So those officers are now available to go out, back up the group of officers that's been trying to manage the crowds at this scene, as we've seen sheriff's deputies brought in from sheriff stations all over the county to try to assist as well. And one more aspect to this that we haven't seen yet is officers have been sent to police stations around the city to make sure those buildings are protected so there's no repeat of what was seen in Minneapolis with a police precinct being overrun and set on fire. Back to you.
NBC4 investigative reporter Eric Leonard, thank you very much. You're watching the NBC4 News at 6, and here is the latest. The city of West Hollywood and Beverly Hills have announced an 8 p.m. curfew. This after Mayor Eric Garcetti announced an 8 p.m. curfew for downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah, Beverly Hills police announcing Rodeo Drive has been closed to both cars and pedestrians. There were some rumors about possible looting happening there. All of it following several protests that have erupted around Los Angeles following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. One in downtown LA, another at Echo Park, where protesters partially blocked the 101 freeway. The largest that we've been following today, of course, in the Fairfax district, where police have now declared an unlawful assembly. It did start off as a peaceful protest at Pan Pacific Park around noon, but then we saw protesters climbing on a bus. They blocked city police vehicles and other buildings in that area, even lighting several vehicles, police vehicles on fire. Nearly
any sort of protesters that erupt there. We've seen crowds disperse when they've deployed the tear gas. They've fired it into the street, and it spread throughout that immediate area there. And demonstrators, protesters, whatever you want to call them, were sent fleeing onto surrounding streets. They're, of course, wearing gas masks and protective gear. The armored vehicles have been rolling through downtown. You have to imagine that Atlanta Police, the Georgia State Patrol, were in a much better position tonight to handle any sort of disruptions by folks than they were last night, when we saw upwards of hundreds of people gathered in the same area near CNN Center and Centennial Olympic Park. There you see police on the move tonight. They're moving in a very calculated manner. They have these situations mapped out long before
introducing the community leaders as they come up, but at first I'd like to introduce the Sheriff of Los Angeles County, Alex Villanueva.
Thank you, Captain Valdez, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Sheriff's Department, the County of Los Angeles, what we want to wish everyone from this point forward is a sense of calm, a sense of peace, a sense of slowing down, and appreciate what we have and we're working very hard to build on. And our hearts go out to the family of George Floyd. It is an outrage, the fact that only one person is arrested and not the other three. We need to see justice served there, and we're going to demand that justice. We want everyone fully accountable. And that's something that, as sheriff, I expect that of the profession of law enforcement. Every chief of police, every sheriff throughout the nation expects the same thing. And justice will be served, but we have
have been hearing about those officers and the zero tolerance that they have for any lawlessness. And Chief Shields made it very clear that last night she allowed people to express themselves. She thought that the protesting was, should have been done, but she says that she believes a lot of the people who were doing the protesting were not from this area and were actually here to destroy the city. We are right down here in the heart of Atlanta at Centennial Olympic Park, right where much of the destruction was last night and the damage that we saw at McCormick and Smith. We're just feet away from the CNN, the iconic CNN letters, all of that destroyed last night. We are seeing none of that type of destruction tonight, none of that type of looting. In fact, we are seeing police marching forward, and it almost as if the protesters are really retreating. They're thinning out, and they are retreating. And at this time, they said they will make arrests if people do not leave the streets. And right now, as I'm looking at Centennial Olympic Park Drive, it is full of police officers, not protesters. So a very, very different picture tonight than last night. Deidre.
And we obviously provide law enforcement services for West Hollywood. We're providing services to the city of Los Angeles as well. And we definitely, everyone is excited to work, to come together, to enjoy a peaceful protest, make a mark, make a difference, but do so in a way that we walk away the next day, our community is intact. It's not trashed. Our businesses are open. They're starting to open now because of the pandemic, slowly but surely. Let's not add another tragedy on top of the tragedy we're already enduring because of the pandemic. We don't need two. Let's just focus on the one, and let's work together. So with that, let's get a first.
Thank you, Sheriff.
And they will follow the law and head home. Those who are here for more nefarious reasons will probably remain in the streets, and those people will be more obvious if we have this curfew in effect, and that is exactly what we have here. And so at this point, I see, just a few protesters, but when I first came down, we saw a lot of signs and people chanting, no justice, no peace. And I talked to a couple of the protesters, and they talked about George Floyd and the police brutality. But at this point, though, it seems that all of that has gone away and that the police have the upper hand.
Angelique, can you tell, you're so close to the white smoke there that we see in the street, whether that's tear gas or is it just sort of a smoke screen that police are deploying there?
I do not believe it's tear gas. There has been a lot of fireworks hurled from the demonstrators kind of towards police, and there's been a lot of smoke from that. I believe that is just the fireworks, because if it were tear
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And I'd like to invite the Elder Joel Paul from City of Refuge Church.
questions I had for some of the protesters that I spoke with earlier tonight, and they said, yes, there is definitely an element of people from the outside who are here, and a lot of those people, they believe, were the looters and the people behind the destruction that we have seen. One of the other things that the mayor said, she described this outside element as anarchists. She said specifically that normally when there are protests in Atlanta, they're about 90% African American, 10% Caucasian. She said what they saw last night was more of a 50-50 mix. 50% African American, 50% Caucasian. And she believes that a lot of those people were sent here, that they were organized. And that's another thing that the chief said. The protesters were very violent. They were combative with the officers. The moment the officers spoke to them, that's not the normal reaction that they get when they deal with protesters in Atlanta. So they said clearly there was a different element in Atlanta last night. And I asked the chief after the news conference today, does she feel like that element is still here? And she said, absolutely, Angelique, I am not going to let my guard down. She still believes those people are in our city. And so are those some of the people that we're seeing here tonight? Who knows? But I can tell you that there have been many arrests, and there are still a few people here in the street on Centennial Park Drive.
And many arrests, and that sounds like
and there
that was some sort of blast.
Firework display.
Firework display. Angelique, you said you arrived there around 7 o'clock and you had these conversations. Give us an idea of the sense or the mood.